I'm Andrew Bolt, and this is the Bolt Report. Why Tony Abbott is right about sacking Tim Flannery. Chief Climate Commissioner Tim Flannery was scaring people again this week with claims that last summer's weather was proof of global warming.
This report does, for the first time, is really show very clearly how climate change is affecting a whole range of extreme weather events and making them more common. And look, last summer, honestly, was the example.
Meanwhile, opposition leader Tony Abbott was threatening to sack Flannery from his $180,000 job.
It does sound like an unnecessary position, given that the gentleman in question gives us the benefit of his views without needing taxpayer funding.
Joining me is Professor Bob Carter, Climate Science Advisor to the Global Warming Policy Foundation. Bob, should Tim Flannery be sacked as Chief Climate Commissioner?
Oh, good morning, Andrew. What a Bobby Dazzler to start off with. Did I stop beating my wife recently, perhaps? I'm a scientist, remember, so I have to phrase that in scientific terms. I guess you're asking, does the Climate Commission, which Dr. Flannery heads, give competent scientific advice? Is that the key question?
Well, probably, but I'd rather see that Tim Flannery, with his record of dud prediction, go out the door.
Well, you saw how carefully Mr. Abbott stepped around that. The commission that Dr. Flannery chairs is a government-appointed commission, and it has certain duties which are to give good advice on climate. They do not give good advice on climate. They give incompetent advice on climate, and you have to ask why. And the real reason is partly the composition of the commission. There's nobody on it, in fact, that's an expert climate scientist. That of itself wouldn't matter. But it's the second thing about the Commission that is the problem, which is they do not do due diligence on the information that's provided to them. And that surely is the sacred duty of a government-appointed body. And so they just accept the word of a political organisation, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and pretty it up a little for the Australian context, and then put it in reports that they issue in their own name.
All right, well, let me pick you up on the latest report that really got me heated. Last summer, it said, was the angry summer, and this was proof of global warming. What was so angry about this summer, so unusual? Because I look at the satellite records and it shows that last January, for example, wasn't hotter than a couple of other Januaries we've had in the past 30 years.
Well, that's quite correct. Just look at the words, the angry summer. That tells you straight away that that report is not a scientific report. No scientist would use words like that. They are emotional, they are not objective. And as soon as you look at the actual facts, as you have just reported, you find that the situation is otherwise. So that tells you again that the Climate Commission is not there to portray science to the public. It's there to portray spin, politically acceptable spin.
But the whole thing too, Bob, is the whole thing, they've got this thing called the Angry Summer Report, right? And they've flogged it in two separate reports. They're so concerned about Australia's angry summer allegedly being a proof of global warming. Isn't the real measure of global warming global temperature, not Australian summers, global temperature? What is the global temperature telling us?
Well, let me just take that latest report. It has at the front what are called 5 key facts about climate, and I've got the list here. Of those 5 facts, 4 are assertions that are actually wrong, and they are about unusual weather events, droughts and storms and so on. And nowhere in those 5 key facts do you find the word carbon dioxide or the word global warming. Now, if you think about that, that is absolutely astonishing in view of what we're supposed to be worrying about, which is human carbon dioxide emissions causing dangerous global warming. So the key fact about that, getting back to your question, is in the last 16 years, there has been no measurable global warming. Everybody agrees about that.
And it's not in their report. It's not in their report. How can you put out a report on global warming, not mention the fact that global temperatures have not risen in 16 years? How can you do that?
Absolutely. Well, you can if your brief from the government is to provide advice that is friendly to government policy. So it becomes a matter of spin. But the second part of that important fact is carbon dioxide emissions have gone up by 8% over those 16 years. Now, those are the two key facts. You've never heard them on the ABC, you've never heard them on SBS, and you've never read them in the Sydney Morning Herald. The Climate Commission is just conforming to the conventional political wisdom of the day and trying to dress it up in all sorts of different reports, the latest one being about angry weather, so-called.
Yeah, well, look, one of those things that really surprised me in this report, now, it says that one sign of global warming is the drought that ended 4 years ago. Now, 2 years ago, on this very show, another of Flannery's climate commissioners suggested that this drought actually did have nothing to do with global warming when I asked him. Have a listen.
We've had very severe droughts before, so again, we cannot attribute this drought statistically to climate change.
So how come this new report suggests it is a sign of climate change? What's going on?
Oh, well, I'm a parent, Andrew, and so you. Most parents know that fairy tales, there's no requirement for consistency of argument from one page to the next. And I view these people as the Ministry of Silly Science. They're just telling fairy tales. And, of course, they're not consistent when you pick two quotations.
Bob, look, I'm just surprised that this is still getting our public money. Bob Carter, thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome, Andrew.